I'm Robert with Knowmium, and welcome back to our hybrid live video series, Part 8. Videos 6 and 7, and now Part 8, have focused on facilitating hybrid activities. This video will discuss coordinating different styles of groups to run different styles of activities in hybrid workshops. In video number 6, I told a story where I was giving different sets of instructions to different breakout groups. Some of them were face-to-face, working together, and some of them were virtual, working together. In that example story, I did not try to blend face-to-face and virtual participants together, but it is something worth considering. It can take some special tech arrangements and other logistics like your activity instructions to make this successful. But let's consider a few ways this could happen. First, you could have face-to-face participants use a laptop or smart device to log into the virtual platform and join a virtual breakout room. Really, those face-to-face participants for a certain activity could become virtual participants, even if they're still in the same room. Now, be careful, because if you have multiple people joining multiple platforms, having multiple discussions, the audio could get picked up by other devices and go into other groups. So we don't need to dive into technology, but always consider that and test for it. Also, think about offices or buildings that have many different levels with many different employees. There may be virtual participants who could leave their workstation and come into the physical training room to do activities with physical participants. Now, you may be asking, well, why would they not join as a physical participant in the first place? Well, I'm not running your program. You would have to answer that question for yourself. But one reason could be we only have a limited amount of space in the physical training room. Some people simply need to join as virtual because we don't have enough seats. During a breakout session, groups could go to different offices, different break rooms, different annexes, and again, virtual participants could simply walk over or go to a different floor. There are a lot of good reasons to consider these blended hybrid groups for these activities. First, it's great to network and diversify the groups. And if you have people working in different offices, different cities, or different countries, bringing them together, allowing them to communicate and allowing them to collaborate together can bring up some wonderful ideas. Also, it can create some long-term bonding, and offices that feel separated, which they are separated by regions and city borders, can at least for some time come together and work together and hopefully enjoy each other's company. You can read more about this in Hybrid Live Guide, but ultimately you're going to need to test this tech and these logistics for yourself based on the situation that you're facing. Whether you have face-to-face breakout groups, virtual breakout groups, or these blended hybrid breakout groups, one thing to consider are physical materials. Now, we don't need to dive back into technology, but it is worth considering. Face-to-face participants may be ready to do face-to-face activities. If they're going to be in these blended groups, what else do they need? Do they need laptops? Do they need smartphones? Do they need audio devices? You'll have to work that out in advance. The virtual people probably have that already because they're joining on the virtual platform. But beyond technology, are there documents that are needed? Physical paper documents. Do those need to be printed? Do those need to be mailed? How much time in advance and how much money is that going to cost? There are training decks where there's different cards with interactions that we could use, but what if we physically need those? Sometimes we could recreate those in an online platform or just buy the digital version, or sometimes we need those physical cards in people's hands. Again, do they need to go to a store? Do these cards need to be mailed? And even if we go into these physical materials like building blocks, or for example, a team building game that a lot of people are familiar with is the egg drop, where you use paper and tape and you build some kind of basket and you drop an egg and see who can drop it from the highest without it breaking. Those are physical materials that people can usually easily access, but it is going to take time for them to get them in advance, or you may have to make do with what people have in their home or in the location that they're joining. Physical materials are great. I'm not trying to discourage you from using them. I'm just once again saying the amount of planning and the amount of testing time may be more if you're running it in a hybrid situation. So for the rest of this video, let's consider two types of group activities: large group activities and small group activities. Keep in mind, some of these groups might be face-to-face, some might be virtual, some might be blended hybrid. I'm not going to discuss that much more. Large groups are large groups, no matter which type of participants they have. So for large groups, why might we want to run large group activities? Well, first of all, think about a training room or a conference room with a lot of people in the same office or the same room. We can get them all doing an activity, whether it's a discussion, whether it's using physical materials, they're all right there together. We don't need to break them up into smaller groups. They're already there, ready to go. Also consider this. There may be virtual groups joining from the same room. If you're working with a large company, let's say that you have a London office, a Hong Kong office, and a San Francisco office. If they're all joining from a smart room or one conference room, they're already there together, and you don't always need those virtual breakout rooms because they're there together. But when you do have some virtual participants, especially if they're on their own computer or they're the only person in their home office, they can easily form large groups on the virtual platform. Whether we make those breakout rooms in advance, or we just say, put 10 people in each breakout room. Now, I know more than 8 people in a breakout room may not be the best idea if we want to get everybody's input and activity. I'm just saying it is easy to put them all together. And there are also a lot of virtual platforms that are meant for these large groups to float around and to freely go into different breakout rooms. Another benefit of large group activities is that you only need one set of instructions for many people. If you have 20 people in the London office, one set of instructions for that London office is great. Sometimes if you have these large groups, one group in London, one group in Hong Kong, one group in San Francisco, one set of instructions fits everybody because they're all just large groups doing the same thing. If we don't need breakout groups, whether they're physical or virtual, that can sometimes save us some time. It's just easier with the logistics. But keep in mind there's a big drawback that you're probably already thinking about. Everybody needs ways to participate. If we have 20 people in the same room or 20 people in a breakout room, will everyone have something to do? Well, what roles will they have? If it's a simple discussion, 20 people may need a lot of time to actually be sure that everybody has been heard from. But if we have other types of activities, think about different game pieces. Maybe one person is the scribe, they're the note taker. Somebody is the rule checker, keeping everything in order. Somebody's the timer. Maybe there's 5 players of the game and other people are kind of facilitating. It's up to you, depending on what you want to organize. The thing is, if one person in a large group doesn't have something to do, they can get bored very quickly, they can multitask very quickly, especially if they are in a virtual breakout room. So, what should we do with large groups? Well, I have 4 quick tips. First, create activities that everyone in a group can engage with. Like I said, everybody needs something to do. We don't want passive observers. We don't need to make everybody having the same role. We can have 2 speakers, 2 listeners, 2 observers, 2 note takers, and so on, and then we could switch those roles. How much time do you have? An activity might take 10 minutes, it might take 2 hours. As long as we know what we're supposed to be doing and we're active and feel like we're contributing to the activity, hopefully there's no multitasking. Number 2, again, multitasking, we need to prevent that. How can we prevent sidetracks or multitasking beyond giving people something to do? Well, that's going to be requiring them to have some kind of result. Everybody's going to be asked for their input in the debrief, or everybody needs to be recording some results in an online app. Everybody needs to be checking to make sure the people sitting next to them are actually participating. There's lots of ways we can coordinate this, but it's worth repeating. Multitasking can kill an activity. Ultimately, it kills the person's learning and their skills development. Number 3, Make sure that individuals in a large group understand how to apply the takeaways. Consider this. Let's say there's a large negotiation activity. We have two teams of negotiators, Group A and Group B. There's 5 people on each team. This is a really large negotiation activity. But there's also 10 more people. Some of them are timers, some of them are note takers, some of them are trying to cause distractions, whatever you have. The individuals who are actually negotiating are getting real negotiation practice. What about the timers? What about people who are trying to create distractions in that activity? Will they be able to apply the same skills, or will they need a chance to be the negotiators themselves? Once again, you'll have to answer these questions based on your own situation and your own goals. Sometimes we just need to have a proper debrief. If some people participated in the activity and other people had minor roles like note takers, we could involve them in more debriefing questions if they weren't the actual negotiators, making sure they can at least verbally apply this to the real world. And finally, make plans for different group sizes. Once again, let's imagine we have 3 offices. We have London, we have Hong Kong, and we have San Francisco. London has 10 people, Hong Kong has 5 people, and San Francisco has 20 people. If we don't want to break them up into virtual breakout rooms, we only want them to work with the people in their same office. We may need a set of instructions for all 3 group sizes for those 3 different locations, just to make sure, once again, people have something to do and they don't feel like they're wasting their time and start multitasking. Now, let's talk about small group activities. Again, small groups could be face-to-face only, virtual only, or blended hybrid. These small group activities give more chances for individual participation. If you only have 3 or 5 people in a breakout room, it's easier to speak up, it's easier to be heard. If we have a negotiation activity with only 3 people, everybody could get a chance to negotiate. Everybody has a chance for input. Once again, if people have something to do and they feel like they're adding to this activity, there's less chance of that side work and that dangerous multitasking. One big drawback with small groups, especially if they've left the room in a physical location or if they're in virtual breakout rooms, communicating with many separated groups is hard or impossible. If you don't know where some physical groups went in a large office, good luck running around or tracking them down. By the time you actually find them, the activity might be over. Even virtual breakout groups might have a way to broadcast a message. Maybe everybody is on an internal messaging system like Teams or Slack, and we could send everybody an immediate message, but that's often one-way communication, or sometimes people just don't see it or check it. It's really hard for us to go into multiple breakout rooms to have two-way discussion over and over and over before time runs out. So, what are my 4 tips for small group activities in hybrid environments? First, pay more attention to sets of instructions simply because small groups need to be communicated with differently. We need to make sure that before we leave the room or before we go into breakout groups, everyone is 100% clear on those instructions. Maybe we need to send them out over email. Maybe we need to post them in the chat box. Maybe we need people to take screenshots. Whatever it is, plan for it so you don't find yourself struggling to get everybody back on the same page. With multiple small groups, be flexible with how they're recording results and also debriefing. There's a lot of wonderful apps we can use to add content. Some people could use their smartphone or tablet or laptop. Some people might walk over to a physical computer in a physical training room. Do they need to add their results on an app, on a whiteboard? Or could we be flexible with face-to-face participants using a physical whiteboard, which we could access with a webcam for the virtual participants, and then virtual participants can simply use an online whiteboard. There's lots of survey tools. We just need to make sure that it's comfortable and accessible for everybody. When we debrief, usually that might be a discussion, but sometimes it doesn't have to be a discussion. It can simply be inputting results and getting facilitator feedback on those results. Number 3, create these groups in advance. Multiple small groups means more space is needed in a physical location. It also means more virtual breakout rooms needed. If we are piecing specific people into specific rooms instead of at random, we also need to plan for that. We need to arrange rooms, we need to arrange technology, we need to arrange virtual breakouts in advance if we want to maximize our time together. And finally, tip number 4. If tech problems exist for any size group, but especially small groups, have backup plans. I already mentioned what happens if a face-to-face participant says, I don't have a device, I don't have a headset. Can I simply join somebody else's group physically or join on somebody else's device? Maybe, or maybe not. That could ruin the logistics of certain activities. So have backup plans for what individuals could do if they don't have the materials or technology, or they simply have just disappeared. If I need a group of 4, but the 4th person just simply isn't responding online, what happens with that group of 3? If I don't have a backup plan, then I have no idea what happens with that group of 3. But if I plan for it, no problem. I can make some quick arrangements and hopefully keep things on schedule.